They say that everyone who was alive at the time remembers exactly where they were when they heard the news that JFK was shot. Well, as Paul Merton says, everyone except Lee Harvey Oswald. But where were you on December the 6th, 2015? Because that was the day that it was announced that Stoke-on-Trent was to have its first Pizza Express. I, like many others, heard it on BBC Radio Stoke. And there's a good reason for that, which Radio Stoke explained through the medium of song.
Well-used people will keep you in touch with the right people. The right people will give you so much. So stay with us throughout the day. We'll even let you have your say on BBC Radio Stoke.
The news people, your news people, remember, had been given a sacred task from Broadcasting House in 1968 with the official local radio guidelines saying,
local news, weather, traffic conditions, every sort of information and advice relevant locally will be broadcast with a friendly informality. They may be scandals, they may be achievements, they may be proposals that should be known to the public. Local radio is an extension of democracy.
So it is that Radio Stoke has a duty to carry information to you. From the Endon woman who looks a bit like Claire Balding to the discovery of alien life forms. Don't get too excited, that hasn't happened yet. But if it did, Radio Stoke would cover it.
Tony Blair has confirmed to Cabinet members that he's to leave office after more than 10 years in power.
With counting well underway in the general election, political leaders are digesting the exit poll, which suggests the Conservatives may not have an overall majority.
4 people are being treated for serious injuries after 2 carriages on the Smiler ride at Alton Towers crashed earlier this afternoon.
The Liberal Party has stepped into the new controversy over the future of Shelton Bar. The statement comes just 24 hours after the BSC closure move.
Stoke City's search for a new manager is over, with the appointment of Paul Lambert on a short-term contract.
The United Kingdom has voted to leave the European Union. 52% of people voted to leave.
And a South Cheshire man has been told by the council to take his bare-bottomed gnome off public display.
Now, there's local news, there's national news, and there's international news. Then there's national news with a local twist, local news that's gone national, international news with local colour, and very occasionally local news that has gone international. Quite where Pizza Express fits into all that, I don't know. Oh, and there's weather news, sports news, travel news, and then generally speaking, more travel news.
Keeping Staffordshire and Cheshire on the move.
You're listening to BBC Radio Stoke.
Radio Stoke, I'm phoning up about a road accident which happened about 10 minutes ago at the bottom of the avenue in Hartfield, where the avenue meets the dual carriageway, the A34, coming out of Newcastle.
BBC Radio Stoke travel news. If you don't turn on, you won't know where to turn off.
When a city is made up of 6 towns, all with their own centres and communities, an effective traffic management system is essential. And in Stoke-on-Trent, we're very lucky because we have one. If you want to travel around the city, it's usually possible to reach your destination only seeing 1 or 2 other commuters. If you go by barge. By car, of course, it can be a nightmare because of the complex cheek-by-jowl nature of the place. Nobody playing SimCity ever came up with Stoke-on-Trent. By the 60s, with more cars than ever, the traffic was intolerable. So in 1962, the A500 project was born. And 16 short years later, this happened.
It gives me very special pleasure indeed, not only in a moment to declare this road open, but declare that in honour of Her Majesty in this Jubilee year, that it shall be named Queensway.
The future had arrived. We won't mention the roundabouts and underpasses and all the bits that were still needed. The problem we thought had been solved, and Radio Stoke took to the sky to admire our wonderful, beautiful, sleek D Road.
Well, it's hard to imagine a better day for D Road spotting. Brilliant sunshine down below, glinting on the houses and the factories of Stoke-on-Trent. And the new road is as much a part of the landscape, there's no doubt about that, in Stoke-on-Trent now as the River Trent itself.
Radio Stoke is constantly drawn back to travel because it's the local driver's lifeline. I like to imagine that once the D Road was open, there was much discussion over whether the station would ever need another travel bulletin, so clear were the roads. But inevitably, the problems continued, and more roads were needed. See if you can guess which road is under discussion here.
There's got to be a kiosk. You can't build a road in a city like Stoke-on-Trent and not expect anyone to be inconvenienced. People will be inconvenienced, but I think at the end of the day it'll be well worth the inconvenience.
But isn't it going to bring a large and very important part of the city grinding to a halt, basically?
Well, if you look around the city now, it's grinding to a halt.
The A50, 3 points. I've heard those two things together before now. When roads are being built, or not, travel news is not just for the motorist. It affects communities and individuals. And people need to know how it affects them. BBC Radio Stoke's Arthur Wood went to Heron Cross to hear the people's plight.
If you walk down to the other end of this road and over the main road, you will find another desolate scene, a whole area that's been cleared, for how long? For quite a while now.
Well, they don't let us know. They just come along, they brick a house up, or they start knocking it down. And we thought, great, they're going to start knocking the houses down. Once they're down, we'll have less trouble with children and everything.
You're saying that you'd like to see the whole thing resolved. Let it go through, let it happen.
Well, let it happen, let something happen. Yeah. Because living here, it's just like a tip. But when is the road coming through? Nobody's let us know. All we know is they keep on putting it back, or they've run out of money, what we read in the papers. You know, what are we supposed to do? We're stuck.
This story dragged on for many years, and for the people of Longton, Fenton and the surrounding areas, local news was their only champion.
4 years after that interview, on November the 16th, 1994, the roadworks in Longton caught up with the roadworks in Trentham, and the city came to a complete halt. The gridlock predicted for Los Angeles in the year 2000 was already here in Stoke-on-Trent.
Oh, I'd love to think that the A50 gridlock made it onto the Los Angeles news. We can only hope. Oh, join us again for HS2, by the way, in the future. Giving a voice to the frustrated residents of Heron Cross is an example of exactly what the news department can do. For local issues to be reported alongside the major international news tells people that their issues matter and that they have a voice.
I've only been here 7 years and I can tell you now I regret the day I come here. It's terrible.
You regret it?
Oh, I do. It's terrible, especially on the square. I mean, there is some nice places in Bentley, but the square, I think it's where all the children congregate at night. The youths, you know, girls, they've got the radios, they've got the football, the glue sniff, you've got all that at night.
You're saying that, have you actually seen it?
Oh yes, I have. I phoned the police about it, yeah. But they can't do nothing about it now.
Post-Partridge, there's a feeling that local news is solely trivial. But these local stories are very important to the people who are living them and have a right to be reported. Having said that, the skateboarding duck or bottom-bearing gnome are never too far away.
And a badly injured lamb found abandoned in a field in North Staffordshire has been given a home for life by a butcher.
The people of the area have a great sense of humour and also much to be proud of, not least in the world of sport.
And the lights are flashed on in Wembley now on this electronic scoreboard. Congratulations, Stoke, winners of the Football League Cup Final.
22.
Port Vale
28.
against Tottenham Hotspur.
Opportunity for the Vale to score, and they have. The second goal is in, and it's Phil Sprosen. There was Sprosen with the Tottenham defence standing around like dummies.
For the title, double 10. It's there! It's there! Bristol the champion in the 80s. Phil Taylor there, the champion in the 90s.
Olympic champions, Catherine Granger and Anna Watkins. Crew Alexander are in the first division. 2 goals for Imwan Chouani. Where were the Germans? But frankly, who cares? Dean Glover lifts the trophy and the fans salute him. Staffordshire, for the first time in 64 years, are the minor counties champions. And there's the final whistle. It's all over. Stoke City are in the Premier League next season.
Joe Clark of Great Britain is celebrating Britain's second gold medal of these Olympics.
BBC Midland Sports Personality for 2004 is Lee Pearson.
For his 11th world title.
Epic in twin.
Overstep, Murphy strikes, goal! The captain scored a stunner!
Adam Peaty takes Olympic gold for Great Britain by an absolute street. Now John Walters surely, in it goes, it's 5! Stoke have scored 5 in an FA Cup semi-final.
So with that, this is John Aberley saying good night to you from West Germany.
I still remember Eric Bristow winning the World Championship. There he was on the front page of the Sentinel with crafty Cockney on his back and the headline, Stoke's Eric Bristow wins World Championship. And now, with apologies to Vale and Alex fans, let's quickly revisit just for a moment March the 4th, 1972.
That's a tremendous shot by Greenham. It's a goal! Stoke have taken the lead again. Eastham is the scorer. Greenham's shot was beaten out there. Greenham's shot beaten out by Bonetti. And there was Eastham scoring from the rebound as Bonetti palmed the ball away from Greenham's shot. Greenham's hard drive from about 12 yards out, pushed out to Eastham, just on hand there to slip the ball past the Chelsea goalkeeper, lying helpless on the ground after his previous save. So there it is, Stoke have taken the lead, 2-1, Stoke City 2, Chelsea 1, with only 14 minutes left to play on my
Once the cup was won, the city came out to welcome the players home, as Jimmy Greenough remembers.
We still haven't got Oli down, it's fantastic. You know, the reception we got when we came back to Stoke yesterday, it was just unbelievable. We expected, well, we were told we were going to have a reception, but never did we expect anything like that. It was like coming back from war, you know, those Union Jacks out, kids dressed up, and the parents put us up all night, I suppose, dressing them up and went, oh, it was fantastic. It's a day I don't think any of us will ever forget.
And what about the ride itself from Barlaston when the train arrived? Were there many people lining the route that...
Oh, no, I didn't know there were so many people in Staffordshire on about Stoke-on-Trent. It was, well, just out of this world. Unbelievable.
The people came out again in March 2000, this time to say goodbye to the city's most famous son, Sir Stanley Matthews. More than 100,000 people turned out in Stoke, and it was one of Radio Stoke's biggest ever outside broadcasts, with reporters everywhere, even on the roof of St Peter's Church. The cortege was joined at the then Britannia Stadium by Nigel Johnson.
Members of the BBC Radio Stoke reporting team feel great privilege to be part of this particular broadcasting occasion. Sir Stanley Matthews was a very private man, and I'm quite sure that in many ways he would have perhaps raised an eyebrow at everything that's happening, but then he would have sat down and thought, this is for the people of the Potteries. A floral tribute of his red and white shirt, a replica of 1961, and there's the spontaneous reaction of these 3,000 to 4,000 people.
They're out in the thousands. I can't tell you how big a crowd it is, and I've seen some mighty crowds in Hanley, far more than when the Queen visited.
A lot of people who've come down here to pay their respects today. I say a few thousand down here at the Victoria Ground, all lining Booth and Old Road at the junction of Lime Street, and of course Sidaway, where the funeral cortege will come up in a few moments' time. Ivor Huff's with me. Ivor, why have you come down here today?
Because I knew Stan, and I used to come to Stoke for 50 odd years, and when I passed him on a Saturday, he'd say, "How are you?" or he had some comment. But he was a Weatherburn drivel.
Well, let's go down to Graham McGarry now, who's down at the crowds that are gathered at Stoke Church. There's thousands in Hanley. Graham, how many in Stoke?
Yeah, there's thousands here, Sam. Welcome back to outside St Peter's Church. Graham Kelly have just going past me as the dignitaries do arrive. The bells, you can probably hear them ringing. Well, a poignant moment as the coffin arrives. Red and white shirt coronations with the number 7 on its back. A sad, sad moment, and a very, very quiet moment at the moment here at the St Peter's Church.
A wonderful send-off for Sir Stan, and one of those occasions when our local story was international news. General elections are the quintessential meeting points between the local and the national news, and politics in this city has come up on the national agenda many times since 1968, with local and national reporters reflecting on the consequences.
It's 7 o'clock. I'm Lizzie Meek. Tony Blair has thanked Labour supporters after winning an unprecedented third term in power.
It's been very tough and hard at points over these past few weeks, but I think we can be really proud of what we've achieved.
I'm in the new Palace Yard at Westminster, just outside Westminster Hall and just under the very imposing tower of Big Ben. I'm just about to head into the Houses of Parliament to meet up with some of our new MPs in Staffordshire and South Cheshire.
Voting has just ended in the 2017 general election after a bruising 7-week campaign dominated by Brexit, spending on public services and the recent terror attacks. An exit poll just published by the BBC, ITV and Sky indicates that the Conservatives will be the largest party but will lose 17 seats.
Let's cross to Fenton Manor because I think an outcome is imminent.
The returning officer just about to give the outcome. I can tell you I can see one candidate smiling and having kisses.
The turnout was 38.16%, and I do hereby declare that the said Gareth Snell has been duly elected.
Well, at 20 minutes to 5, we can now say the decision taken in 1975 by this country to join the common market has been reversed by this referendum to leave the EU.
Let June the 23rd go down in our history as our Independence Day.
In the months leading up to the Brexit vote, BBC Radio Stoke hit the streets to take the local temperature on whether the Potteries was in or out. But this wasn't the first time you'd had your say on Europe. Cast your minds back, if you can, to 1973 and the debate over whether we'd be better off joining the European Economic Community or not.
I think it should have happened years ago, and it's far better for all the English people. We've got to change and go with the times.
I think it'll be a good thing. Of course, it's got its snags in the first place. It's bound to have a few snags starting into anything new. I think it will be a good thing in the future.
Personally, I think it's a bad thing. Because, I work in a shop. Over the last few weeks with the rise in prices, every day we get complaints. So twopence a pound on this, twopence on that. And I think it's wrong. It's all right, as long as we're getting the increased wages.
Nobody's had any experience yet, it's only started today. And we're not going to do very well for some time. It might adjust itself in a year or two, but for the time being, we're going to do very poor.
Well, I was abroad last year and the prices were appalling. In fact, it was too expensive to spend your money. You brought it home again. And if we're going to go like that, we're going to be very bad.
It's fascinating to hear those opinions in the light of the present-day situation. And once again, it shows the significance of your views. The European discussion, remember, is older than Brexit. And Radio Stoke is older than Jacob Rees-Mogg. 1979 saw the first European elections.
Has it worked? Have we benefited? Should it be changed? Should we get out? Good afternoon. So we turn this afternoon to the common market, with those European elections, the first international elections, less than 2 weeks away.
At every stage of the so-called European project, we've been asking your views, and to listen back now is particularly poignant. The price of butter, as ever, was in the forefront in the 1980s, as Anne Walker discovered.
Well, I don't know, things have got so much worse since we've been in the common market. It might be just a coincidence. They might have gone worse anyway, but it seems to me that they've gone worse.
What particular things are you thinking?
Prices. I suppose butter, cheese, or things like that. Everything seems to have gone up. But whether or not they'd have gone up anyway, I don't know. There seems to be too many rules and you seem to have to go along with everybody else whether you think it's worthwhile or not. So I think we should pull out.
We don't seem to have gained anything at all since joining, and it seems thoroughly bad for the nation anyway.
Well, the immediate experience has been disastrous, I suppose, in the short term, but if you look to the longer term, surely Britain's future must lie with Europe.
Politics, sport and travel are the newsroom's daily sustenance, but every now and again it has to react to bigger events, and often react quickly when the world comes crashing in.
Big bang, and then we saw smoke coming out and everybody started running out, and
and we saw the plane on the other side of the building.
Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts.
I was in the base of the building when this thing happened. First of all, there was a huge bang, and it felt as though...
We're trying to keep up to date with what's going on in London on the show this morning. All kinds of problems following a series of explosions. Tony, who's from Trentham, is in London this morning. Morning, Tony.
Good morning, Stuart.
Good morning.
Direct from London. We are, 1 or 2 miles away from the nearest blast, but it just rocked the whole of the city.
Yes, Tony, thanks very much for joining us. We've got Jodie back in with the latest on what's going on.
Yes, we've just heard that the explosion in Tavistock Place has been confirmed as a bomb, and also there are reports coming in now that the police have sealed off an area south of Liverpool Street, and they say a bomb has gone off on that street. So do stay with us and we'll keep you updated as much as we can.
Massive stories, good and bad, can arrive from nowhere. And often, as in that report from the Tavistock Square bomb, local listeners get in touch to give Radio Stoke the latest news. At other times, the station goes to you for your opinions and reactions. Mark Stewart went out to gauge the feeling after the death of Princess Diana.
The day dawned yesterday, Sunday, August the 31st, 1997, as one of the blackest and most storm-tossed days of the year. The torrents of rain and the cracks of thunder forced all but the hardiest off the dismal and unfriendly streets. An ugly and bitter end to a glorious summer, and the weather reflected another black incident.
I'd just woken up, set my alarm clock with the intention of going to church as I do every Sunday, and a neighbour of mine was knocking at my back door because he didn't know if I'd heard the news and he wasn't sure if I was up, and he'd been up quite early and heard it. And I just went to the door in my dressing gown, and he said, "There's terrible news for you." He said, "Princess Diana's been killed." And I just couldn't believe it. I was just shell-shocked.
In Hanley, shoppers at Clough Street Market were devastated by the loss of one of Britain's most popular public figures.
I didn't believe it, to be quite honest, till I actually saw the news, and then I think there's a loss. There's going to be a big loss, and I feel really sorry for her sons.
She'll be missed. She'll be missed by the people, won't she?
Well, she was the people's person, wasn't she? Everybody loved Diane, everybody.
Phil Bradbeer, manager at Trentham Gardens, just happened to be in the Radio Stoke studio to talk about the Beatles coming to Staffordshire on a particularly significant morning.
When your memory can go back to that day in 1963, how did you feel today when you heard the news that John Lennon had been shot?
Well, obviously very sad, because the Beatles have supplied so much marvellous music over the period of, nearly 20 years now, that it's got to be a sad day for the world of music when somebody who's left such a legacy of brilliant music is shot so brutally.
Massive international stories can often have a local dimension, and at other times, what is happening locally can be part of a national story.
In the troubled North Staffordshire coalfield, there's another strike, this time by craftsmen protesting at the way miners help management prevent flooding in their pit. Nearly 4,000 men are idle at 2 other Staffordshire pits because of maintenance work.
They will put a summons on the 6 official picketers, that's myself, plus these other 5. Now what he's trying to tell me is for me to tell the men to disband. I've asked the men, and these men are willing to stop where they are.
Staying here, we stay. There's over 200 men there, they aren't getting paid. Them blokes who've been through here are getting paid. So we're standing here and we're having back up with all them men being there, and we're asking the blokes properly and showing them an official form stating their rights and their unions and what was said.
The 1980s miners' strike was the dominant national news story of the time, and local journalists were able to add to the information with opinion and reporting from close to home. It was a long and bitter struggle, and 5 years later the consequences were still being felt, with more closures, more fear and more economic hardship.
As the cars and coaches have driven through the gates here at the pit this morning, there's been the odd friendly wave and the occasional hooting of a horn to greet us. That's a sign of the determination of the men who work here to put a brave face on what they've told me in private is a devastating blow. Younger miners tell me they don't know how they're going to support their young families when they're made redundant. Older ones tell me they can't see themselves ever working again. All are agreed that jobs will be hard to find in the midst of a recession and that they face a very bleak future indeed. Simon Fitzgerald, BBC Radio Stoke News at the gates of Trentham Pit.
In the 50 years since Radio Stoke began, it's seen the decline and in some cases disappearance of many of the area's major employers, especially in the fields of coal, steel and pots. The words on the lips of those tasked with the rebuilding of the city's fortunes is regeneration. And the first tentative steps were taken when Stoke-on-Trent and its population were chosen to host the National Garden Festival in 1986. It was seen as a catalyst for doing just that. Regeneration. The festival reclaimed the old Wedgwood Etruria site and prompted one of many royal visits to Stoke-on-Trent. The Queen noted the city's canny ability to turn a new page in its history, and wasn't the last to do so, as visits since then had followed a theme.
Many years ago, here at Etruria, Josiah Wedgwood laid some of the foundations of the pottery industry, which through good times and bad has grown, adapted and kept the name of your city before the world. It is therefore appropriate that at a time when this area has need of regeneration, a derelict site should have been transformed into green and pleasant land.
Prince Charles arrived here at the Middleport Pottery on a canal boat. He's come up all the way from the Etruria Industrial Museum.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the President of the Prince's Regeneration Trust, His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales.
It is an enormously special day when we can actually demonstrate to all of you the way something like this Middleport Pottery can be brought back to life. I hope that this project at Middleport is proving to be a catalyst for further regeneration in Burslem. Stoke-on-Trent is the cradle of the British ceramics industry, and the contribution made to this country by the potteries has been enormous. Thank you for your support.
The news is rarely something you can prepare for. It is, by definition, new. Reporters arrive at the station unsure of what the day will throw at them. Something tragic, something light, something local, something global. But some stories are destined to stay with you. One, in a village community, brought the attention of the national media to North Staffordshire in the 70s. Leslie Whittle was just 17 when she was kidnapped by a man who'd later become known as the Black Panther.
It's been nearly 6 months now since 17-year-old Leslie Whittle was kidnapped from her home at Highley in Shropshire during the early hours of January the 14th. Wearing only a dressing gown and slippers, she was taken some 70 miles to Bathpool Park, Kidsgrove in Staffordshire, and forced into an underground shaft. And on March the 7th, some 7 weeks later, she was found dead, hanging by a wire noose 60 feet underground.
But the public was never meant to know about her kidnap. It was leaked to local radio and then local newspapers. As time went on, BBC Radio Stoke reported on her disappearance in great detail, including an appeal from the man leading the investigation from Kidsgrove, Commander Morrison.
During the 3 months that I have been at Kidsgrove, the murder inquiry headquarters, we have received over 20,000 phone calls, taken more than 17,000 statements, and our index of information is contained on nearly 500,000 cards. We know a very great deal about this murderer. We know what he looks like, the way he talks, the way he walks. Can your conscience still allow you to be silent? Listen to Leslie Whittle's last message to her mother.
Mom, you're to go to Kidsgrove Post Office telephone box. The instructions are inside, behind the back board. I'm okay, but there are to be no police and no tricks, okay? Please, Mom.
Chilling. Donald Nielsen was eventually given 4 life sentences in July 1976 and died in prison in 2011. This was a different time, and the way the police investigated and local media reported it set a new precedent of news blackouts to help reduce the chances of similar media frenzies. It's a story that has remained in my memory. It is tragically sad, disturbingly local, and hints at the evil in the world. God rest your soul, Leslie Whittle.